Well, hello and welcome to the Creative Christian Podcast. Today's guest is Mark Winter. Thank you for coming on, Mark.
Hey, I'm excited, and thank you for not putting an S at the end of my name because tons of people do that.
I
And
actually have a friend whose last name is Winters, so I'm surprised I didn't do that.
well, most people do. My dad used to tell people who added an S to the end of our name, he goes, "Nope, I'm just plain cold weather, winter.
That's
That's
funny.
it."
It is a good season for you right now, also.
Well, I'm in Texas, so we have about 2 days of winter, and that's it. And we're kind of in fall right now. Few leaves fall, and then we're into winter for about 2 days, and then comes the summer. We don't have spring here either.
Well, it's good that there's only 2 days of winter because then you get to be winter for the rest of the year. The
In the
star.
flesh.
Yeah, we're actually pretty cold and rainy here today. Um, so that's fun.
We've had beautiful days here in Texas. We've had it's been warm through October, but it's starting to cool down now, which is great because I like the cooler weather.
Me too. Look at us, fun and exciting people talking about the weather.
We are getting officially old when we're talking about the weather. Let me tell you.
People who are listening to this, Mark, we got to kick it up.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, well,
All right.
I'm excited to talk today. We're going to talk about arts in the church, reaching people through the arts as evangelism. And I just want to share a little bit about you. So I know that you are into drama, you've done acting, you're a writer, you've always been involved in theater in some way. And so God really did a cool thing in your story when you shared with me. Getting to hear that was pretty cool about how God brought you into the church with that ministry. And so would you kind of want to share a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I got into drama through baseball. So let me explain that. I grew up playing baseball. In fact, my dad was my little league coach for a couple of seasons, and he loved baseball. So that's how I came into it. And then when I got into high school, I realized that I was outstandingly mediocre in the field and that the talent pool was getting smaller and smaller. And I was like, I'm not going to make it to college baseball. And I'm not even sure I really wanted to at that point. When I had a friend come up to me and said, "Hey, I hear you're quitting baseball." I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why don't you come to drama class? There's a lot of girls in there." And I was like, "Oh, okay. All right. I'll give that a try." Well,
Yeah.
I actually found out that I loved it. I mean, I had a, a flair for acting. I could memorize my lines pretty quickly. I've always loved movies and plays. I remember my parents taking me to plays when I was younger, and I was just fascinated by the stage. And so I got into drama class in high school and just absolutely fell in love with it. My drama teacher cast me in a couple of plays. Then I got to college. I majored in theater for a year. And then, like baseball, I thought, you know what? The talent here is amazing. And even though I feel like I have a measure of talent, I'm not going to Hollywood. I'm not going to Broadway. So I switched to journalism because I've always liked writing too. And that was a better fit for me. But I was a prodigal son for 15 years. I left the church, I left faith, and that didn't work out so well.
Mm.
Kind of like with prodigal son. I was unsatisfied. I had an empty hole in my heart. And so I found Christ, or Christ found me, however you want to look at it. And then I became a pastor for about 15 years. And I noticed that even in my pastoring, I had this itch for drama. So every once in a while, I'd dress up in costume and do dramatic monologues. And the people seemed to like that. And then I started writing scripts and recruiting other people in the church to come in and help me with some plays, Easter plays, Christmas sketches, that kind of thing. And then after about 15 years of that, I thought, I feel pastoring is good. I felt called into ministry, but I feel like I'm more of an evangelist than a shepherd. And so, with the permission of my denomination, I launched an evangelistic ministry called One Man Show Ministries. A lot of people I had a couple of people say, "What? That sounds kind of conceited, one man." And I was like, "Well, no, here's the deal." And I put this in all my letterhead. I quoted Romans 5 that the one man who was Adam brought sin into the world, but one man, Jesus Christ, brought righteousness into the world. So the one man was Jesus, and I was the show. So I felt like Christ and I teamed up together, partnered together. He was the casting director, the dramatist, the chief dramatist in residence, and I was his servant. And so I did a lot of dramatic monologues. Probably I don't know how many I wrote. Somebody asked me that one time, and that was years ago. And I think I'd come up with about 50 sketches at that time, and I've added even more. I did biblical characters. I did the bathrobe and sandals thing, but I
Yeah.
also portrayed the disciples as modern men too, and people love that because I'd have so many people come up and say, "God, that was so relevant. That was so accessible." And so I realized that I'd hit the target in my life and ministry when I started bringing drama into the church.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love hearing that. We talked a little bit about my story, and I don't know how much I shared with you about drama, but theater is actually what God used to bring me to him. So I had in college, I finally got to do all this creative stuff I never got to do. I got to do musical theater and all that. And
Yep.
my first role was a 63-year-old German librarian named Gerda.
I want to hear your German accent.
Well,
Mine.
you will. I'll show you. So
Okay.
actually, I listened to tapes in the car of German dialect over and over and over. Opening night, there was a couple from Germany in the audience, and they said, "What part of Germany are you from?" And
Oh,
I said, in my very American accent,
you are the boss because I don't know. My German accent is confined to Schwarzenegger, who's not German. He's Austrian, Geo Arnold. That's
"Okay,
about
that's really good." Now you have to say, "It's not a tumor."
it's not a tumor. You know what? We're going to have our own show here, and people are going to tune out if we're not careful.
I think they're gonna be all in. They're gonna be so into
Uh,
this.
well, that is awesome. I mean, what? That's high praise right there.
Well, yeah, and so that led to like a director being in the audience, seeing me, recruiting me to come to a community theater, which I know you have a big heart for and love.
I do.
And so yeah, walked in the door for the very first time, saw this guy on stage, and I was like, I'm gonna marry that boy. He was like, in the spotlight, he was like, ah, and then he like hops off stage, comes and right up to me, and he's like, "Where did you come from?" And I'm like, "My mom." Like I was like, I don't even have a
I
good.
knew that was coming.
You
I,
did.
I think I, I think I kind of know you well enough to know that that was coming from my mom, of course.
My gosh. I wish that I had known me well enough to know that was coming and not said it. But anyway,
No, that's
so
okay.
that guy got saved a month before we met, and so he brought me to church, and that's the church I'm a part of today, still 10 years later. And
Oh,
so yeah, and it was really cool how God used all of that in that season of my life. And so man, I love that you went and identified like, hey, this is kind of where I feel like God is calling me with
yeah.
the gifts that I have. Was there kind of a moment that the Lord really spoke to you about that, or did you just kind of go one
I
plus one
think it was a
equals two?
process. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was a process because I belong to a denomination that required a lot of meetings and paperwork and rules and regs, and that I am not a meetings person. I we had a meeting at our church last night, and it was our yearly business meeting, and it was awesome. It lasted like 20, 25 minutes, and everything was very agreeable and amenable. And I said, that's my kind of meeting. I got tired of arguing about what color the carpet should be in the sanctuary when we were going to buy new carpet and that kind of thing. And those things are necessary. And some people are really cut out to do that. And God
God
bless
bless
them.
him.
There's a lot of pastors who are administrative that need to be, but uh, when I formed my own ministry, I was distressed to know that I still had paperwork and I had to form a board and that kind of thing. But I got to do mostly what I wanted to do, and that was acting. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, with that, I did do community theater. As you said, when I quit the theater as a major in college, I was very involved in the community theater in that town. And then probably, what was it, a dozen years ago, my wife saw an audition notice for a local community theater that I didn't know much about. I'd heard the name. And she said, "Hey, they're auditioning for Camelot, which is one of my favorite musicals in the world." And I was like, huh. So I went and auditioned, and I didn't think I got the part because the director dismissed a group of people, and I was in that list. And I
Mm.
was like, womp womp.
Yeah.
So I started walking out the door, and then he flagged me and said, "Hey, tall guy, right there, you in the leather jacket." I was wearing a black leather jacket. And I turned around, and he goes, "Come here for a second." And I walked over there, and he goes, "Do you sing?" And I said, "In the shower, yeah, I sing real well in the shower." And he said, "Well, I want to cast you as Sir Dinadan. I think you've got the chops to be Sir Dinadan." I said, "Doesn't he sing some?" He goes, "Yeah, but we'll get you vocal lessons." So God works in mysterious ways, right? So
Yes.
I got vocal lessons and learned how to sing, and so I was able to add singing to my repertoire. And then I was cast in Fiddler on the Roof and Scrooge the Musical 3 times. I can do a very good Scrooge. Footloose, I portrayed the uptight preacher who banned dancing in his town. And that stage musical has some deeply spiritual messages in it. In fact,
Mm.
I had a guy come up to me. The actors always went out in the lobby to meet the patrons.
Yeah.
And this one guy came up to me with tears in his eyes. And he said, "My dad was like your character." And,
Wow.
but unfortunately he never softened. And
Mm.
it was good to see a dad, an adult figure who softened his heart toward his
Man.
people. So, even secular drama, God can use.
I find that there's rarely a time when I watch a movie or a show that there isn't some kind of principle I
Right.
feel like God is speaking to me through.
Right. And I think that's the yearning in every human heart, is to
Yeah.
connect with God, whether people know it or not. And so I watch a ton of Netflix. I love drama of all kinds. And there's intensely spiritual messages in a lot of the so-called secular stuff. So,
Yeah. You know what's funny? It's probably a little embarrassing. Hallmark movies. God is often like, "You're
well,
the girl in this story, and here's the lesson I'm trying to teach you."
the Hallmark producers are working on a second plot. You've heard that, right?
I was like, "Wait,
Sorry.
what is it?"
I've never watched a Hallmark movie, but I grew up with 3 sisters, no brothers, and so I'm in touch with my feminine self.
Yeah.
And I hate to admit this, but I would probably enjoy Hallmark movies.
You
I've never watched them. I do like action and Schwarzenegger and that kind of stuff, but
you
I don't
probably
know. Maybe I
would.
should give it a shot.
Just like I enjoy baseball, and I really do enjoy baseball, and I love that that was part of your story. And it made me want to ask you, have you ever been in the damn Yankees?
I have not. I've never been in Damn Yankees. That would be fun. I could play the devil, I guess.
I always wanted to do Lola, because she gets to do a cartwheel, and I really can't do a cartwheel, so I was like, it'll be a challenge.
Yeah, you'd have to practice that for sure.
Okay, remember, people are listening. Jumping back to what you said about using the arts in church, I really
Hmm.
want to talk about that,
Okay.
because it's something you and I both have in common. So I shared a little bit of my story with theater bringing me to the church. Once I got to church, my pastor really challenged me. I was in ministry school at this time, to lay down acting for a year, because he was like, "Hey, you need to know who you really are without pretending to be other people."
Yeah.
But in that time, I was able to like help our children's pastor write this gospel presentation that we presented to all these foster families so that they could come to know Jesus. And then he ended up going to a different campus the next year. They were like, "Hey, Jen, so you want to write it?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And I did that for several years. I think they even used them after I moved away, used them again,
Okay,
which is pretty cool. But,
that is.
I think they're, as much as like cute things like that are awesome, that drama gets to be used in the church. I think there's an even bigger place for it, and I know you have some thoughts about that if you'd like to share.
Um, yeah, the deal is, I and you know this, but the arts is not just drama. That happens to be our bailiwick for sure. But the church can use different forms of art, different media to convey the gospel message. So, for instance, besides drama, which in itself can encompass tons of forms
Right.
like tableaus, which are still life, actors going into still life poses, choral readings, um, puppetry, mime, all those are forms of drama, but there's art. And in fact, I just watched your podcast with Rudy, the
Yeah.
artist. Yeah, have you seen Chalk Talks before in
No.
church? Oh, these are amazing. They're artists who, some literally use chalk and an easel, and others paint, but they'll paint uh, pictures of Jesus or the crucifixion or the
Mhm.
empty tomb to music, or sometimes they'll explain what they're doing. And you see this entire dramatic picture unfold before your eyes. It's awesome. Sculpture, photography, dance, so many different forms of drama that can be used in the church that I think are underutilized in the mainline denominations, I would say. And maybe in some other more conservative denominations too. I mean, it's not for everyone, and I get that. In fact, I had a guy one time, an older gentleman, when after church, me and the pastor went and visited him because he was ailing a little bit. And the pastor said, what'd you think of Mark's drama today? And he goes, didn't like it. And the reason he didn't like it, I was portraying Peter. I I was portraying Peter as a Texas shrimp boat captain, because I figured if Peter came back today, he'd be a Texan, loud and proud, boisterous,
All right. Makes
reckless.
sense. Yeah.
Wears a 10-gallon hat and a 10-gallon mouth. And he didn't like it because I wore rubber shrimp boots and kind of torn up jeans and a cap as I was portraying Peter. That's the reason he didn't like
At
it.
church? How
Yeah,
dare
yeah,
you?
I know. And you know what? As you can tell, I'm pretty mouthy. And being a preacher, I come by that naturally. But I decided to keep my mouth shut. I said, "Man, I'm sorry you didn't care for that today. I hope somehow or another you'll get think about it, maybe get a message from God." But
Mm.
he was adamant that he didn't like it. And I've run into other people who were less offensive who said, "Yeah, I don't care for that," which surprises me because as a nation, as a people, we shell out billions of dollars literally every year for streaming
Yeah.
movies and TV shows, Broadway shows, movies, you name it. We're a culture that loves um, movies and drama and plays. So I don't
Yeah.
know. Did I answer your question? I don't even know if I did.
I don't know if you did either, but it's all good.
I'm like a politician. I'll just start running with it, and I'm not
Circles.
even sure I addressed the issue. So
I'm gonna pass that one up. Um, but anyway, yeah, no, I agree. I think that that the dramatic arts in particular have gotten a bad name in churches.
mhm.
I'll tell you what's not for me: miming. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Well, you have to be really. That's interesting you said that, because I am not really a mime. I did clowning for a while, actually. I had a clown persona named Pockets the Clown. But I did do a mime communion one time, and I had a cross built where I could pour the wine out of the cross. for the communion cup,
Yeah.
and the bread was a little baby. So I was portraying, cradling baby Jesus who would give his life for us. And I know a lot of people don't like that, but I did actually have a lot of feedback. People said that was probably one of the most moving communion services they'd ever seen. But
Wow.
and I didn't realize I was a mime, but apparently I can mime a little bit.
Well, and you see, like, even though I say I don't like miming, I can't deny the power of God in the room when it was happening. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
care for it. It's not my style, but it doesn't invalidate it, you know?
No, no, yeah, I get what you're saying. There's some like I can't dance to save my life. It was a kind of a joke at the theater when I portrayed Scrooge at the very end. There's this big number, and the choreographer came up. She goes, "I'm going to give you 3 simple moves," and I said, "Thank you." That though I appreciate dance, I can't do it. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's not for everyone, and I'm certainly not an advocate of doing drama every week. I know there were some churches back in the I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, drama was very prevalent in a lot of the evangelical megachurches. And I've noticed it's kind of tapered off. So maybe we got oversaturated with it. And I don't notice it as much in churches anymore, but I still think used sparingly and judiciously, it can be a powerful tool to reach people.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common to see some elements of that at Christmas and Easter
Yeah.
in today's times. But you know what's wild? There was a an Easter service a couple years ago that a really well-known megachurch did, where they did this portrayal of Jesus's, I believe, his crucifixion and like kind of his story,
Uh huh.
but some liberties were really taken. So there's a scene where all these demons are in hell and they're talking, and like the way that they're talking about their butts. They're like talking about twerking, like different things like that. So it's like
Huh.
really like, are we? At what links are we going to try to, for the sake of reaching people, versus
Right.
like, hey, we want to be relevant to people to draw them in, you know?
Sure. Well, and I told you about the Fellowship for Performing Arts in New York, which I want to follow up with you on that, by the way. But they did the screw tape letters. They do the screw tape letters, and it it is a impactful drama. It's set in hell, and yet there was no twerking or cursing or anything that would offend people. It was simply taken right from C.S. Lewis's book. But the set was spooky. They had bones and skulls lining the walls, and the stage was crooked, kind of disorienting you. So there's ways of portraying that kind of stuff without trying to be too cool and too relevant.
Yeah,
Know what I'm saying?
I agree
Yeah.
100%. I think it's like what people are afraid of is that the world will come into the church. And maybe that's why
Yeah.
they shy away a little bit. And so you do see things like that. But
No, yeah, I get it. I get it.
and the amount of money that is spent to produce something like that they did, there was pyrotechnics and all this. It's just, it raises a lot of concerns for people about, is this appropriate in church or not? And I believe I had a friend who said, I'm not going to Broadway, I'm going to church. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get that.
No,
I do.
I get that too. I definitely get that. So there's some church, there's a mega church near me that does drama. They did Beauty and the Beast last year, auditioned for it and didn't get the part.
Uh,
Sometimes, I was auditioning for the father, Maurice, right?
yes.
You're the, okay. But the production was done outside of church, but it still was part of their ministry. And they do explicitly spiritual um, dramas during Christmas and Easter, but it's not in worship. So I get it. Some people want worship to be reverent and controlled. Uh,
Mm,
I did most of my dramas though in worship, and I always tried to be respectful, My scripts I wouldn't say are controversial unless you see Peter dressed up as a Texas shrimper or Thomas as a skeptical newspaper man. Those scripts were taken from a guy named Jerry Cohagen from Liliness Drama. I don't even know if they're still around, to be honest with you, but that he wrote some dramas portraying the disciples as modern men that were very, very good. And he inspired me to write some of my own. But yes, church is not Broadway. And that's why I said we need to use it sparingly, I think. And we don't need to get caught up in the production value so much that people leave going, what was that about?
Yeah. Yeah. We did a production a couple years ago at the ministry that I worked for, where you wore these headphones, like silent disco headphones, so you heard the production through your headphones, but if you took them off, you wouldn't hear anything. And you walked through, like, you sat down for a seated stage play of like Genesis, and then it ended, and then people prompted you to get up and walk outside, and then boom, you're right there with the disciples. And so you follow them as they like meet Jesus and as he calls them, and then the Last Supper and the garden and the crucifixion and all that. And it was, I'm telling you, one of the most powerful things I ever,
Sounds like it.
I just was like in a supporting administrative kind of role for this, but just to even be in the room and see the final product, I mean, it was mind blowing. And so I think you want to have that kind of, hey, this was all about Jesus. It was clear, when it is something like that, I think. But I think there is still a place for entertainment that speaks to our hearts, that is real and we can relate to.
Yeah. Again, I had probably I'd say 99% of people that when I go into a church and do a monologue were very appreciative. I always include humor, even when I'm doing my biblical costume dramas. Like I do Simeon, the righteous man in Luke 2, and I come out talking about how I come out dancing to a Jewish dance beat. And I said I don't dance, and I don't, but I can do a little, And then I look at the congregation and I say, you may wonder why old Simeon has a bounce in his step and a song in his throat. After all, you can see that I am no spring chicken, more like a midwinter goose. And people think that's funny, and I'll get chuckles. But humor can break down barriers, and I always include some humor here and there in my sketches so people will feel at ease, they'll relax, they'll have a little laugh. You said that the other day, that a cheerful heart makes good medicine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Your accent, by the way, was good. You must get that from being in Fiddler on the Roof.
That's my Tevye accent for sure.
Yeah.
In fact, people have come up to me and said, "You sound like Tevye," and I went, "Well, that's about the only Jewish accent I can do." So,
Yeah, that was my first musical that I was ever in. I don't know if I told you that the other day,
no,
but
who did you play? One of the daughters?
you wish. I wish. No, I was just in the chorus, but we
Oh,
made my character, we gave her a name, and she had some in the blocking, there was some very essential blocking to the crux of the story.
well, you know what? Giving her a name is the craft of a true actress.
Yeah.
Because even if you have a minor part, you want to have a name, you want to have a backstory.
Oh
You,
yeah.
you know, you want to live it. You want to be a method actor, right?
Yeah, the backstory was she was the cousin of the sisters, and she was in love with one of the male love interests. And so you'd always see her in the background like, "Oh
Pining.
no." Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that is good stuff. How come you didn't make it on Broadway? You need to, with that kind of
Um
skill.
I think it's the Lord is probably why.
Yeah. Well, the Lord definitely forbade me to go to Hollywood because actually I went to, my wife is from SoCal, from Southern California, Newport Beach area. And I actually went and applied at a couple of schools for writing masters. I had in mind to write for TV shows, and I think I would have been pretty good at it. But I got accepted into the writing program at USC, and got home, looked around, my friends, my church, my family, uh, being or living in Texas for so long. I was like, I don't feel like I really want to do this anymore. I don't want to go. I just that I think God took the desire out of me, and
Mm.
I'm so glad I didn't go, because I think I would have succumbed to all kinds of temptation and sin out there. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I felt like very called to go to LA probably, gosh, 7 or more years ago. And I went out there on a mission trip, and that was actually when the Lord spoke to me and said that I was called to bring biblical truth to the entertainment industry. So I thought, I'm supposed to move out here. And my pastor, let me tell you,
he
he was
said,
like, no. And his pastor was like, you know what, Jen, you should think about coming out here. So then I went to him and I was like, well, your pastor said that it's a good idea. And he was like, oh, he did he? You know, and so he's like, let me call him. And so he's like, she's not moving out there. And
"Wow, your
what
pastor really cared."
yes, very much. Yes. In
Wow.
fact, one night, so we got back from, he was on the trip, on the mission trip with a group of us. He was leading our team. And we got back. I was doing childcare for him and his wife. We're very close, like for their small group.
Mhm.
So we're in the van, like riding home from small group, and kind of like, when it's like family, when you're like saying things that are like really snide remarks, but they know what it's about.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
So my pastor's wife, she goes, I don't even know what y'all are talking about. What is going on? And I was like, well, your husband told me that I can't move to LA, and I feel like God is telling me that I need to move out there. And he said, I didn't tell you couldn't do it, Jen. I just said no. I was like,
He went from pastoring to meddling, right?
yeah, really kind of like being a spiritual dad.
Yeah.
But I remember her telling me, okay, Jenny, what I think he's trying to say is like,
No,
he really just wants you to be planted in community and like flourishing in the house of God and growing and your character development and blah, blah. And at the time I was like a kid. I mean, I was like, this is stupid.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
look back on it and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I didn't go, because my pastor tells me now, he's like, Jenny, you want to go out there and minister to the homeless? I was afraid you were going to be homeless. Like, you know what? That could have happened, but everything in the Lord's timing.
Correct.
I
Yeah.
keep meaning to bring this up, so I'm going to jump in with it now, and I'm going to segue into talking about wow God stories. So, um, I think I shared with you. I actually don't know if I shared with you, so tell me. But with what God did in my story through theater, I knew when I went into ministry school I would write a musical about my testimony. And so I started writing it back then, and it really is like a completely different piece of work than from what it is right now. Because it's been like 10 years. And so in the beginning, it was very like, realistic. And now it's kind of taken this completely different shape of becoming almost sort of like a fairy tale about a lost princess who looks for um, a king, because she was kind of she's the lost princess. She's kind of abandoned by the king and queen, and kind of grew up not knowing she was a princess. And so it really symbolizes like,
Love it.
yeah, it kind of symbolizes our human journey of like, hey, actually God is my father. I have a royal identity in Christ. He's called me to do things for the kingdom. And so she's got to go on this journey of finding the king. Basically, she has this book. So the book is like the Bible, right? She's got this book that was left to her, and it's all she has from her childhood and growing up, and it tells this story about the lost princess. And so she loves the story, and she has some like characters who guide her along her journey and give her input and help her, which is really symbolic for how God does that in our own stories and puts people in our lives to help us along, and he speaks through them. And so anyway, so she meets this prince on her journey to try and find the king, and he actually steals the book from her and tries to find the king for himself, and like abandons her and leaves her without anything, and just really like betrays her. And it's in that place where the king actually comes and finds her. He finds her, and she's like, I didn't even know if you were real. I wanted you to be real, and I definitely didn't think you were looking for me, you know? And so, whew, I feel the Holy Spirit. Anyway,
I do too. I got these God bumps because, ironically, I wrote a blog today on the prodigal son and how Jesus told this story to tell us that God is on a hunt, a search,
yeah,
not just sitting up in heaven watching all of this, but is actually moving through the Holy Spirit. And when we turn, he dashes toward us. So,
yeah. I love that. Well, then the king finds her, and it's kind of like she goes through this Esther period of like, being refined and learning, okay, this is who I really am. But almost immediately the Lord's like, hey, or sorry, the king is like, hey, I want you to now go find the good prince. And she's like, oh, I want nothing to do with that. The prince hurt me, and God's like, no, but the king is like, there's a good prince out there for you. And so it really has like a lot to do with my story. And what you find out is like in the very beginning of the story, there's a mom and a dad reading a book at bedtime to their daughter, and it kind of like goes back and forth into this real life girl's life, and she's the one who's writing the story about the lost princess because it's her
oh,
story. And so it's really this kind of like intricate thing, but I'd have to like send you some scenes someday, and you can
have
tell
you
me what you
published
think.
this?
No, so
Okay.
no one can steal this.
Yeah, no,
This is
copyright
copyright
2024 by
right
Jennifer
now. I
White.
just said it right now.
Hey, so did she find the prince? Because it sounds like there may be a little romance in this.
Well, the dad that she's reading the story with is the good prince that she
Okay,
finds in the end. So,
that is great.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to read it.
Well,
We
I've
can
been
make it
working
into
on
a
it.
Hallmark movie.
There could be a book and a Hallmark
Yeah,
movie and
yeah.
an album and merch. We could make
You
t-shirts.
find a good publisher, let me know because I got a children's book that I've been trying to sell for about 300 years now, and it's hard to publish out there now. Well, it's not hard to self-publish, but the
Yeah.
self-publishing market has been flooded with a lot of junk. So,
Yeah.
it's really difficult to get traditionally published nowadays.
Well, and I've told you well, maybe I didn't, but have I told you about the vision the Lord gave me for the creative Christian?
No,
Oh, okay. Well, this
do
is good
tell.
for those who are listening. Yeah, the Lord really, what you just said, the sentence you just said, the Lord really showed me that, in the calling he revealed to me about bringing biblical truth to the entertainment industry, that it was deeper. There were three parts to a ministry I would have, which is the creative Christian. One part is like a school to help creatives learn their gift in a faith-filled
I saw that
environment.
website today, by the way. That's awesome.
Oh,
I didn't know that was an arm of your ministry, but that's cool.
yeah. And then the second part is a production company. So creatives like you who are Christian, who have a book or a movie or a TV show or music, can get it put out into the world. Because what the Lord showed me is like, man, there's like storehouses in heaven with these ideas, these books, these songs, these movies that he wants to give to people so that they can make them and it can reach people and draw them to the Lord. But what he showed me is the Christians are like, no, I don't know how to do that. Like, I could never do that. Are you kidding me? Like, I can't, because it's so hard to find the way, to like find the
Yeah.
strategy, to find the answers. And so the Lord was like, hey, so you're going to make something for those people so they can do that. And then the third part is equipping them to use their art for evangelism and missions. And so,
Love it. Love it.
yeah. So
You go, girl.
you go, God, because I can't do it. It's
Yeah.
too big.
Yeah.
But he'll do it. He'll make it happen. And so, yeah, so I know you want to talk about wow God stories. And I kind of wanted to share what I just did with you because um it is my wow God story. Like how God has used my testimony and what God has done. And so, yeah.
Wow. So, Wow God stories in relation to dramatic arts. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I just know you mentioned it in our initial
Well, I
conversation. So,
actually did. There is a podcast called Wow God, and I actually did record a couple of stories for them. Didn't really have anything to do with drama, but yeah, I in the church I have come across so many people who were scattering seeds, and a lot of times I'd say most of the seeds I scattered, I have no idea if they've
mm,
taken fruit or not. I mean, that's the case with our evangelism efforts most of the time. We're not going to see the results, but God knows, and God gives the
yeah.
growth, and we have to be content with that. But I've seen little sprouts come up. Like I did Simeon years and years ago, and a woman came up to me with her 12, 13-year-old daughter and said, I have never heard that story before. I said, really? I said, well, it's in Luke chapter 2, right after the story of the shepherds and the nativity and all that. And she goes, that was an amazing story. How the Holy Spirit prompted him to go into the inner courts, and there he found the Messiah baby. She goes, I'm going to go home and read that story. We're going to read it today. And I said, go do that. Go do that. I've had numerous feedback from people who have told me when I walk in character and costume and start my monologue that their kids will put down their coloring sheets. One lady told me 3 boys sitting next to her were on their Game Boys during worship. I'm assuming they had it on a silent mode, but when I walked in, I did Lazarus that day. And when I walked in, she said they immediately looked up at me and put their Game Boys down. She goes, I've never seen preteen boys lock onto a message like they did. And I said, good. That's awesome. And
Mm,
I've gotten those kind of stories multiple times where people said, I never really grasped that story before until you portrayed it. And so drama in the church is incarnational. We put flesh onto the story when we do that,
yeah.
and make it accessible and reachable for common people, for people who may sleep through the sermon. And nothing against preaching, because I preached hundreds and hundreds of sermons, and I love preaching, and I love a good sermon. But like I said, occasionally drama shakes things up and gets people's attention in a way that a 25-minute sermon can't.
Mm.
So,
Did you ever hear about Amy Simple McPherson?
yes. Was she the evangelist?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Right.
her church was the the original, like, so it's Angelus Temple in
Yeah.
LA.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
I think like her, around the time she was there, was the start of the Foursquare movement.
Right. Now it's coming back to me now. Yeah.
Yeah, but she used to do these dramatic interpretations of scripture, like have a giant whale set, and if she's telling the story of Jonah, like do these big, larger than life kind of things, and it would draw people in, and was like part of a great revival in LA. And so I just love stories like that. I think there's a place for it for today. And so, Mark, I know you have a book you're working on. Do you want to share about your book?
I have worked on it, and it's now in the marketplace. But let me go back to what you said about the McPherson and the whale. There, I went to a church one time, and I was going to do Peter the shrimper. They had built a boat for me. I mean, they had this
Wow.
big boat, and then they put an ocean backdrop with shells and fish and nets and all that. And I was a little nervous because I was getting a little older at the time, but they had steps leading up to the boat. And the whole time I was like, Lord, please don't let me trip on these steps, and please let me be able to straddle this boat and get inside of it. But once
Yeah.
I did, it was fine. But yeah, I mean, they went the extra mile, and it really made the whole thing pop. But yeah, going back to the book, I'm ADD, as you can tell.
It's okay.
In 2001, I actually had a book published traditionally by a publishing company called River Oaks Publishing. They've since been acquired by David C. Cook Communications. The book was a little paperback called If There Is No God. And I got the idea one day. I was barbecuing and out on the back porch, and I noticed this gorgeous sunset. Just took my breath away. And I was like, if there's no God, who's painting that picture right now?
Mm.
Well, scientists could explain about ultraviolet light bouncing off dust particles in the atmosphere and all that. But there's a beauty and a mystery to the universe that I ascribe to God. So I said, hey, that sounds like a book. So I wrote, I don't remember how many entries there were, but if there is no God, then why? And then I would ask the question. And then I had little devotional entries and scriptures. Well, I had that book for so long, and I was like, this book needs a sequel. There's so many other mysteries and wonders and miracles in this universe that I want to cover. So I wrote like 60 more and put it out it's an ebook format only, because getting things published in paperback is very expensive. You can go on KDP and on Amazon and write your ebook and get it uploaded for free. They'll take their cut because, Jeff Bezos needs more money for sure. But but distribution's another thing. I used to be able to sell my books at churches and stuff, but I don't go to that many churches anymore with my drama ministry. But I'm available if anybody's wanting a dramatist.
It's just it.
So anyway, this book is I think some people wrote reviews on Amazon, and a couple of people said I use this as a witnessing tool because it's not heavy apologetics. It's kind of whimsical apologetics where a lot of them are, well, one guy reviewed it and said, yeah, it's a very delightful book, but it's kind of cheesy. Okay, fine. At least I got a review, right? But if there is no God, who taught the spider how to crochet? And so I go into why a spider's web is so strong. And there's these little things called nanostrands that's built into the web. And if the web was big enough, it could catch an airliner. That's how strong the spider's web is. That's God, man. God built that engineered it into existence itself. So that's what the book's about. It's a fun little, it's light, it's easy to read, but I wrote it mainly as with an evangelist's heart, that people could carry this around in their phone and go to unbelievers, to skeptics, to doubters, to people struggling with their faith and go, hey, look at this one. This applies to your life right here, this particular entry. So,
Wow, that's awesome. I love that, Mark. Thank you for sharing.
well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah. If you had one word of wisdom you could give to theatrical artists of any kind, actors, writers who love drama, who maybe are feeling kind of out of place in the church, what would you say to them?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have an easy answer to that, but if your church doesn't accept your creative bent, and you want to stay in that church, there are probably other churches in your area that would welcome you. And there's also community theater. Our community theater that I was involved in was run by righteous people, and they did not put on shows that were R-rated at all. So we produced the classic musicals and family-friendly fare. So find a community theater and then hone your craft, enunciate, get your voice up to an acceptable volume, look at actors and actresses that you admire, not to imitate them, but to study their method. This is not, I find it natural, but still at my age, I'm still trying to hone my acting craft and to learn more. There's always something new to learn. Always.
Yeah, that's really good. So stay teachable out there, folks.
Stay teachable. Yep.
I love it. Well, thank you, Mark. I know you have some places where people can connect with you on social media. So Facebook, if you're a Facebook person, facebook.com/wordsbywinter.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's
I
what I
just
got here.
okay. Well, good. I'm glad you know because I just formed that authors page about 2 weeks ago, and I still don't know what my URL is.
Well, it's
And then
Words by Winter.
I'm on Medium too. Do you have that?
At
www.medium.com/a word please. Did I
Yeah,
get it?
it says at a word please. Does that matter?
Yes, at
Okay.
a word please. Thank you for
And
keeping
then
it great.
Instagram also a
Yeah,
word
a word
please
please. Uh huh.
2024.
I have a 24 at the end of
That's
that.
what you wrote. That's what you gave me, Mark.
I'm telling you what, creative people like you and me, we get scattered sometimes, right? It's
Yeah,
okay. Hey, all you creatives out there, it's okay to be a little ADD. That's how the creative mind works. We're spinning all the time.
I like it. And look, a word please 2024, that is the correct place to find you. I'm going to give you a follow right now. Everybody listening, go give him a follow. Let's get it started. Let's get it going.
Woohoo! Hey, here's my
God,
phone. It says Instagram notification. The power of technology.
look at that. All right. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Mark. I'm excited for you. The best is yet to come for the gifts you have and how you build the body of Christ.
Well, right back at you. And I really appreciate this podcast. And I'm going to catch up on all the podcasts that you've done because you have such an easy, natural style. And
Oh,
you've got a heart for God. I'm following your Pure Heart series on Facebook, and you're doing tremendous work. God's using you greatly. So thank you.
well, thank you. Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody.